What if I told you there are places in the United States where traffic jams don't exist, your phone barely buzzes, and the loudest sound at night is the wind brushing past pine trees? In a country famous for busy cities and nonstop movement, there are still towns where time feels slower, neighbors know each other by name, and silence isn't uncomfortable. It's comforting. These places aren't myths, and they're not off limits. You can actually visit them, walk their streets, and experience a version of America most people never see. Another question worth asking is this: why do so many people feel drawn to remote towns right now? In a world overflowing with notifications, noise, and crowds, quiet has become a luxury. Remote towns offer something rare: mental space. They aren't frozen in time or abandoned. They simply chose a different pace. These towns exist far from highways and tourist traps, yet they remain accessible, welcoming travelers who are respectful and curious rather than rushed. There's also a common misconception that remote means boring or unreachable. In reality, many quiet U.S. towns are surrounded by stunning landscapes, deep history, and tight-knit communities that thrive precisely because they're not crowded. You won't find massive malls or flashy attractions here, but you will find local diners, historic main streets, and natural beauty that doesn't need a filter to impress. And finally, here's the most surprising part. Visiting remote towns doesn't mean sacrificing comfort or safety. These towns are lived in, maintained, and open to visitors. They simply ask for one thing in return: slow down. If you can do that, you'll discover why so many people fall in love with these places and quietly dream about never leaving. Some of the quietest towns in the U.S. are tucked deep into mountain valleys, where winding roads naturally limit traffic. These towns often began as mining, logging, or railroad communities, and while the industries changed or faded, the towns remained. What makes them special today is not what they produce, but how they live. Mornings begin early, businesses open when the sun rises, and conversations aren't rushed. Visitors often notice that no one seems to be in a hurry, and that feeling quickly becomes contagious. Other remote towns exist in vast desert regions or wide-open plains, where the landscape itself creates distance from the modern world. Here, space feels endless. Buildings are spread out, the sky feels larger, and nights are incredibly dark, allowing stars to dominate the view. These towns may look quiet on a map, but they're full of life in subtle ways: community events, local traditions, and a strong sense of independence shaped by geography. One of the most important things to understand about quiet towns is that silence doesn't mean emptiness. Many of these places are rich in stories. Old storefronts, historic homes, and faded signs hint at decades, or even centuries, of life. Locals are often proud of their town's past and happy to share it with visitors who show genuine interest. Instead of museums packed with crowds, history here is told through conversation and preserved buildings. Visiting remote towns also changes the way people experience travel. Without packed schedules or endless attractions, you're encouraged to be present. A simple walk becomes meaningful. A meal becomes memorable. Even sitting on a porch or by a lake feels like an activity rather than wasted time. For many travelers, this slower rhythm becomes the highlight of the trip, offering a sense of calm that's hard to find elsewhere. It's also worth mentioning that these towns are not isolated from the modern world. They simply interact with it on their own terms. You'll still find basic services, local businesses, and places to stay. What you won't find is constant stimulation. That balance is exactly why these towns remain quiet. They don't chase attention, and they don't need it. As we move through this list, you'll notice that each town has its own version of remoteness. Some are hidden by mountains, others by distance, and some by sheer lack of publicity. Yet they all share one thing in common. They offer an experience that feels increasingly rare in today's world. A visit to any of them isn't just a trip, it's a reset. In the next parts, we'll start exploring specific towns that embody this quiet, remote charm. Each one proves that you don't have to leave the country or reality to escape the noise. Sometimes, all it takes is choosing a road less traveled. Have you ever arrived somewhere and immediately felt your shoulders relax, as if the place itself was telling you to slow down. That's the effect many quiet and remote U.S. towns have on visitors. These towns don't advertise loudly, don't compete for attention, and don't rush to impress. Instead, they offer something far more powerful, an atmosphere that gently pulls you out of the noise-heavy rhythm most people live in every day. One of the first things travelers notice in remote towns is how different time feels. Hours don't seem to disappear as quickly. Without packed attractions or constant distractions, moments stretch out. A short drive turns into a scenic experience. A quick coffee becomes a long conversation. In towns like these, people don't just pass through, they linger, even if they only plan to stay for a day. Many quiet U.S. towns are surrounded by natural barriers that keep them peaceful. Mountains, forests, deserts, or long stretches of open land naturally limit traffic and tourism. This geographic isolation plays a huge role in shaping daily life. Locals plan ahead, value self-sufficiency, and maintain strong community bonds. Visitors often sense this immediately, noticing how welcoming yet reserved these towns can be. Another powerful hook is how sound, or the lack of it, changes your awareness. In remote towns, silence isn't awkward. It's normal. You hear things that get drowned out elsewhere. Footsteps on gravel, wind moving through trees, distant birds or a train miles away. These sounds don't compete for attention. They coexist peacefully, creating an environment that feels grounding rather than overwhelming. Some of these towns are built around a single main road with just a handful of businesses. A local cafe, a general store, maybe a small museum or post office. These places serve as community hubs, where news travels by conversation rather than notification. For visitors, stepping into these spaces feels personal, not transactional. You're not just another customer, you're a guest. History plays a quiet but important role in many remote towns. Some began as mining settlements, farming communities, or railroad stops. Over time, populations shrank, industries faded, and attention moved elsewhere. But instead of disappearing, these towns adapted. What remains is a sense of continuity, old buildings still in use, traditions quietly preserved, and stories passed down through generations. This layered history adds depth to even the simplest walk down the street. What surprises many travelers is how alive these towns feel despite their quiet nature. There are community events, local gatherings, and seasonal rhythms that guide daily life. Summer might bring small festivals or outdoor markets, while winter slows everything down even further. Visitors who arrive at the right time often experience moments that feel deeply authentic, not staged for tourism. Another reason people are drawn to remote towns is the connection to nature. Many of these places sit near national forests, lakes, rivers, or wide open landscapes. Outdoor activities don't feel like planned excursions. They're simply part of daily life. A morning walk might turn into a wildlife sighting. A short drive could lead to a viewpoint with no crowds and no fences, just open space. Importantly, these towns aren't trying to be escapes from reality. They are reality for the people who live there. That's why they feel so grounding. Life still happens. Work gets done, meals are cooked, seasons change. The difference is the absence of constant urgency. This slower pace often inspires visitors to rethink how much noise and speed they've accepted as normal. Traveling to quiet towns also changes expectations. Instead of asking, "What's there to do?" people begin asking, "What does it feel like to be here?" That shift transforms the experience. A simple sunset becomes memorable. A quiet street at dawn feels meaningful. These moments don't rely on entertainment. They rely on presence. As we continue exploring more towns in this series, you'll notice that each one defines remote differently. Some are far from major cities, others are simply overlooked. But all of them offer something increasingly rare: space to think, breathe, and reset. They remind us that quiet isn't empty. It's full of possibility. In the next part, we'll look at towns where remoteness meets resilience, places that thrive precisely because they've chosen a quieter path. What if being far away from everything actually brings people closer together? In many quiet and remote U.S. towns, distance isn't a weakness, it's a strength. These towns didn't survive by accident. They survived because the people living there learned how to rely on one another, adapt to isolation, and build communities that function without outside noise constantly interfering. One of the most striking things about remote towns is how visible community life is. Unlike large cities, where neighbors may never speak, quiet towns make connection unavoidable in the best way possible. People greet each other by name, conversations happen naturally, and newcomers are noticed, not judged but acknowledged. For visitors, this can feel refreshing and unfamiliar at the same time. Another powerful draw is how these towns balance independence with cooperation. Many residents live far apart, sometimes miles from their nearest neighbor, yet the community remains tightly connected. When weather changes suddenly or resources are limited, people step up for one another. This shared responsibility creates a sense of trust that's hard to replicate in busier places. Visitors often sense this immediately, even if they can't quite explain why the town feels so secure and grounded. Remote towns also teach patience. Services may operate on limited hours, deliveries take longer, and plans sometimes change due to weather or distance. Instead of frustration, locals embrace flexibility. That mindset slowly rubs off on visitors, encouraging them to release rigid schedules and expectations. What initially feels inconvenient often becomes part of the charm. Many of these towns exist in areas where nature plays a dominant role. Mountains, forests, or open plains aren't just scenery. They actively shape daily life. Seasons matter more here. Winter can be long and quiet, while summer brings bursts of activity. This rhythm creates a deeper awareness of time, reminding visitors that life doesn't need to move at the same speed year-round. Another hook that keeps people fascinated is how these towns preserve identity. Without constant outside influence, traditions remain strong. Local recipes, annual events, and shared rituals continue generation after generation. These aren't performances for tourists. They're genuine expressions of local culture. When visitors are welcomed into these moments, the experience feels meaningful rather than manufactured. Technology exists in these towns, but it doesn't dominate life. Internet and phones are tools, not anchors. People spend more time outdoors, more time talking face-to-face, and more time simply being present. For travelers used to constant connectivity, this shift can feel uncomfortable at first, but it often becomes one of the most memorable aspects of the visit. Remote towns also challenge the idea that progress only comes from growth. Many of these places intentionally stay small. They prioritize sustainability, preservation, and quality of life over expansion. This doesn't mean they're stuck in the past. It means they've chosen a future that values balance. Visitors who expect stagnation often leave impressed by how thoughtfully these towns function. Another reason people are drawn to these locations is the sense of safety and predictability they offer. Not because nothing ever happens, but because life follows familiar patterns. That consistency creates peace of mind. Streets feel calm, nights are quiet, and daily routines feel grounded. For travelers overwhelmed by unpredictability elsewhere, this stability feels like relief. As you move through quiet towns like these, you start noticing details you might otherwise miss. The way buildings blend into the landscape, the care taken with small things, the absence of rush. These subtle qualities create an environment where reflection feels natural, not forced. Many visitors leave with more clarity than they arrived with. What makes these towns truly special isn't just their remoteness. It's the intentional way people live within that remoteness. They prove that distance doesn't mean disconnection. In fact, it often leads to deeper connection, stronger values, and a slower, more thoughtful way of life. In the next part, we'll explore towns where remoteness meets breathtaking scenery, places where the landscape itself protects the quiet and keeps the crowds away. Have you ever wondered why some places remain quiet even in an age of constant travel and online discovery? In many remote U.S. towns, the answer lies in the land itself. Mountains, deserts, forests, and vast stretches of open space act as natural guardians, filtering out crowds and preserving a slower way of life. These landscapes don't just surround the towns, they define them. One of the strongest hooks of these locations is how the journey shapes your mindset before you even arrive. Long drives, winding roads, or hours without seeing another vehicle create a gradual transition away from noise. By the time you reach the town, you're already calmer. The landscape prepares you for what the town offers: quiet, space, and perspective. Many of these towns sit at the edge of national parks, forests, or protected land. While nearby attractions might draw attention, the towns themselves remain understated. They don't compete with nature, they coexist with it. Buildings are often simple, designed to blend into the surroundings rather than dominate them. This harmony creates a visual calm that visitors instantly feel. Another powerful draw is how nature controls the rhythm of daily life. Weather determines schedules, seasons dictate activities, and daylight shapes routines. In winter, life slows dramatically. In summer, everything feels alive and expansive. This connection to natural cycles creates a deeper sense of time, one that feels more human and less mechanical. Sound behaves differently in these environments. Instead of traffic or crowds, you hear wind moving across open land, water flowing nearby, or animals in the distance. These sounds don't overwhelm, they ground. For many visitors, this natural soundscape becomes one of the most memorable aspects of the trip, especially at night when silence feels almost complete. Another reason these towns remain quiet is accessibility. While they're open to visitors, getting there often requires intention. There are no accidental stops. People who arrive usually do so with purpose, which naturally reduces congestion and preserves the town's atmosphere. This intentional travel helps protect the culture and environment from overexposure. Life in landscape-defined towns also encourages simplicity. Without constant access to big city conveniences, residents learn to value what they have. Meals are planned, resources are respected, and waste is minimized. This lifestyle isn't about deprivation, it's about awareness. Visitors often leave with a renewed appreciation for small comforts and thoughtful living. The scenery itself becomes part of everyday life rather than a tourist attraction. Sunrises and sunsets are noticed. Stars are visible. Weather patterns are observed. These details subtly shift how people think and feel, creating an environment that encourages reflection rather than distraction. Many visitors report feeling mentally lighter after spending time in these places. Despite their quiet nature, these towns aren't isolated from the world. They're simply selective. They maintain roads, services, and communication while resisting unnecessary expansion. This balance allows them to welcome visitors without losing their identity. It's a delicate relationship between openness and preservation, and many of these towns manage it remarkably well. Another hook lies in how these towns redefine adventure. Instead of adrenaline-fueled activities, adventure becomes about exploration and presence. A walk through a quiet street, a drive with no destination, a moment spent watching clouds move across a wide sky. These experiences don't demand attention, they invite it. As travelers, spending time in these places often changes how we define value. Instead of measuring a trip by how much we did, we measure it by how we felt. Quiet towns surrounded by powerful landscapes remind us that not every experience needs to be loud or fast to be meaningful. In the final part, we'll bring everything together and explore why quiet and remote towns aren't just places to visit. They're places that leave a lasting impression long after you return home. Why is it that some places fade from memory the moment we leave, while others linger long after the journey ends? Quiet and remote U.S. towns have a unique way of staying with people, not because of what they show, but because of what they remove. They strip away excess noise, pressure, and distraction, leaving space for clarity and thought. That absence becomes the most powerful part of the experience. One of the strongest hooks of these towns is how they subtly change perspective. After spending time in a place where life moves slowly, returning to a busy environment feels different. Crowds seem louder, schedules feel heavier, and constant stimulation becomes more noticeable. This contrast isn't negative, it's revealing. It helps people recognize just how much noise they've been carrying without realizing it. Another reason these towns leave a lasting impression is their honesty. They don't try to impress or entertain. They exist as they are, inviting visitors to meet them on their own terms. That authenticity creates trust. Instead of curated experiences or scripted interactions, visitors encounter real people, real routines, and real moments. These genuine experiences tend to stay with us far longer than staged ones. Quiet towns also reshape how we think about time. Without constant deadlines or packed itineraries, days feel fuller even when less happens. A single afternoon can feel meaningful. A simple conversation can feel important. This shift reminds visitors that fulfillment doesn't always come from doing more. It often comes from noticing more. Another powerful hook is how these places encourage reflection without forcing it. There's no pressure to be productive or entertained. Silence allows thoughts to surface naturally. Many people leave remote towns with unexpected clarity about their priorities, relationships, or goals. This isn't because the towns offer answers, but because they create space for questions. These towns also challenge common ideas about success and progress. While much of modern life focuses on growth, speed, and visibility, quiet towns prioritize sustainability, balance, and continuity. They show that a good life doesn't need constant expansion. Sometimes, stability and simplicity are not signs of limitation, but signs of intention. For travelers, the experience often becomes deeply personal. Two people can visit the same quiet town and come away with entirely different takeaways. One might feel inspired to slow down, while another might simply feel rested. That flexibility is part of what makes these places special. They meet people where they are, rather than telling them how to feel. Another reason these towns remain memorable is how they engage the senses differently. Without visual clutter or constant sound, subtle details stand out. Light changes feel dramatic. Weather feels present. Even routine moments feel textured and real. These sensory experiences anchor memories more strongly than crowded attractions ever could. It's also important to note that visiting quiet towns builds respect for people, places, and pace. These communities thrive because they resist excess. Visitors who recognize this often travel more thoughtfully, understanding that presence matters more than consumption. This mutual respect helps ensure that these towns remain quiet, welcoming, and intact for future travelers. In a world increasingly defined by speed and exposure, quiet and remote U.S. towns offer an alternative. They remind us that not everything worth experiencing needs to be optimized, shared, or amplified. Some experiences are powerful precisely because they are private, slow, and understated. As this journey comes to an end, one thing becomes clear. Quiet towns are not escapes from life. They are reminders of it. They show us what remains when distractions fall away, and they invite us to carry a little of that calm back with us. Even after leaving, the feeling lingers, proving that sometimes the most meaningful destinations are the ones that ask the least from us.